From the beginning all beings are Buddha. Like water and ice, without water no ice, outside us no Buddhas. How near the truth, yet how far we seek. Like one in water crying, I thirst. Like the son of a rich man wandering poor on this earth, we endlessly circle the six worlds. The cause of our sorrow is ego delusion. From dark path to dark path we've wandered in darkness. How can we be free from the wheel of samsara? The gateway to freedom is Zazen Samadhi. Beyond exaltation, beyond all our praise is the pure Mahayana. Observing the precepts, repentance and giving, the countless good deeds and the way of right living all come from Zazen. Thus one true Samadhi extinguishes evils. It purifies karma, dissolving abstractions. Then where are the dark paths to lead us astray? The pure lotus land is not far away. Hearing this truth, heart humble and grateful, to praise and embrace it, to practice is wisdom, brings unending blessings, brings mountains of merit. And if we turn inward and prove our true nature, that true self is no self, our own self is no self, we go beyond ego and past clever words. Then the gate to the oneness of cause and effect is thrown open. Not two and not three, straight ahead runs the way. Our form now being no form, in going and returning we never leave home. Our thought now being no thought, our dancing and songs are the voice of the Dharma. How vast is the heaven of boundless samadhi! How bright and transparent the moonlight of wisdom! What is there outside us? What is there we lack? Nirvana is openly shown to our eyes.
This earth where we stand is the pure lotus land.
And this very body, the body of Buddha. This is the second day of this January 1981 Toronto Sesshin. And we will continue reading from the Three Pillars of Zen, first about what is left of the biography of Bassui, and then we'll read one of the letters. I believe the last sentence we read was, in the intense combustion of this overwhelming experience, Bassui's previously held conceptions and beliefs, we're told, were utterly annihilated. This intense combustion, not to make a new fantasy out of this, but there's the possibility for intense combustion when energies are not wasted. Through dreaming, fantasizing, wanting, not wanting, all kind of friction. And friction energy runs itself out. When no energies are wasted, then there is a great intensity. The intensity of probing, questioning, inquiring, delving, diving, digging. Whichever way you want to put it. The best thing is not to put it in any way, but to do it. Hu or mu. Or no waste in experiencing inhalation, exhalation, meaning no distance there. Only inhalation, exhalation, no name for it. You don't know what it is, neither do I. Nor do the physicians, even though they can explain it. But it's never the whole thing. But we can do the whole thing. Miraculously. And we're dreaming our time away. With a little fraction of this brain. Again, to remind you, can one listen to Teisho with the totality of one's being, undivided, sixth patriarch, whenever he started saying something, always would say, please, please, friends, give your undivided attention. If there's undivided attention, nothing needs to be said anymore. Undivided attention meaning no ego point of view, ego perspective, bringing in one's old opinions, notions, ideas, knowledge. No intention to hoard, to store what one hears. Can the mind empty itself of all of that so that there's just the listening? This is arduous. It's not sitting back like in front of a TV where everything comes to you. One person said in Doksan that after the first Teisho she was wiped out, she was exhausted. That shows you're working. The following evening, Bassui came to tell Koho what had happened. Hardly had he opened his mouth when Koho, who had despaired of ever finding a true successor among his monks, declared, as though addressing all his followers, "My Dharma will not vanish. All may now be happy. My Dharma will not disappear." Must be tremendous joy. For a teacher, when somebody really understands, so that he is no longer the teacher and the other is no longer the disciple. My Dharma will not vanish. Whose Dharma is this, anyways? Because it was not meant in a possessive way, even though when we use this word my, it's always possessive, wanting to possess and not relinquish, just passing it on to some of my so-and-so. This is not meant here. The Dharma itself, how can it vanish? Dharma is the truth of this whole universe, of all of life as one. And yet it needs people to point things out to people who want to listen and to find out for themselves. Not just follow a teacher, because most of us want to do just that. We're glad if we can count, there are thousands who, as though this meant anything. Numbers mean nothing. Hakuin's teacher told him, if you just have one true disciple, meaning one person who understands, Koho formally conferred Inka on his disciple and gave him the Zen name Bassui, high above average. Bassui remained for 2 months near Koho, receiving his instructions and guidance. But Bassui, who had a strong and independent mind, wished to mature his profound experience through Dharma combat with accomplished masters so as to integrate his experience thoroughly into his conscious mind, into his every act, and to develop his capacity to teach others. It used to be the traditional way, and there were masters abounding at that time, apparently. And to go and to have interviews and discussions with masters, to find where one was still hooked. You can find this all the time in your discussion with anybody, whether you're hooked, whether you need to propel yourself, defend yourself, whether you feel hurt or want to do the other one in, out of revenge. This all can reveal itself to an attentive mind. Or whether one is rendered speechless because one has the idea of how knowledgeable the other person is with whom one is talking, whether one is intimidated by fear because of what one expects the other person to say or do. This is the essence of Dharma combat. Or is one free? Freely speaking, freely remaining quiet. And whatever needs to be said coming freely, not that one digs around in one's memory for a clever thing to say. So as to integrate his experience into his conscious mind, into his every act. It isn't really that there is integrating of an experience into the mind. It is to have awareness and seeing and alertness and wakefulness. So whatever comes up is seen for what it is and seen through and gone beyond. Always freshly from moment to moment in daily life. Seeing coming out of emptiness. Emptiness meaning the absence of this ego point of view, which comes up, it's so strongly ingrained, so deeply conditioned, right in the brain. Can it be seen? Totally. Not just partially. If it's seen partially, it'll still carry on. Seen so that it does not hold sway, it does not distort or corrupt. So he left Koho and continued to live an isolated life in forests, hills, and mountains not far from temples of famous masters. When not engaging them in Dharma combat, he would carry on his zazen for hours at a time, which is what he needed to do. Wherever he stayed, our zealous aspirants quickly discovered his whereabouts and sought his guidance, but feeling himself still deficient in the spiritual strength necessary to lead others to liberation, he resisted their efforts to make him their teacher. It was a remarkable thing. No desire to become somebody now, to find a new role in his life. Students didn't mean a thing to him. When the entreaties became importunate, he would pick up his meager belongings and vanish in the night. Apart from the entreaties of would-be disciples, however, he deliberately curtailed his stay in any one place so as not to become attached to it.
really had some deep-seated thing there, not wanting to stay any place. This karma of the homeless one who never stays any place. Of course, if there's no fear, how could there be attachment? If there's complete freedom from fear, how could one become attached? And can the fear be seen? At length, now 50, that's interesting, at 50 he started teaching. Nansen, we're told, stayed for 30 years on top of a mountain before he was finally sort of ordered down by the prefect to come down from that mountain and start doing something. And Joshu, he was 80 before he started teaching. He roamed around for 50 years before he settled down to start teaching. Maturing, deepening. And yet one can also question or ask whether there cannot be deepening in this constant relationship in everyday life. Conceivably, one can sit in a mountain hut for years and feel as clear as a mountain lake, but have all these inner vanities and ambitions and desires, anger. Is this all wiped away, wiped clear? This can only be. I wonder whether rules will ever make a good human being. It's been tried, not just by Bassui, by all religions, to make all kinds of rules in the hope that the outcome will be a good human being. But for some reason, it never works. Following rules, one can become conditioned to act in certain ways which on the surface look all right. But deep inside, is there freedom or is there the me? And if the me rides in the saddle, then all goodness is a sham or a show of goodness. There's an interesting dialogue I brought the wrong book. I'll bring it tomorrow. Something Bankei, the 16th century Japanese Zen master. A very unconventional man. We have to read about it. How he talked to some people of the Vinaya sect with all their rules. His comment on rules. Just before he passed away at the age of 60, he taught for 10 years. Bassui sat up in the lotus posture and to those gathered around him said, "Don't be misled. Look directly. What is this?" He repeated this loudly. Don't be misled. Look directly. What is this? And then calmly died. Here it goes on. The teaching methods of every great master inevitably grow out of his own personality, his spiritual problem as he experienced it, and the mode of Zazen which gave birth to his enlightenment. For Dogen, whose religious strivings came to a focus in a problem totally different from Bassui's, and whose full awakening came without a koan of any kind, Shikantaza became the prime teaching method. Although if one reads in Dogen some of his writings, Dogen propels questions at his disciples all the time. Look into this deeply, question this deeply. The answer is always in the question. Basui's natural koan, on the other hand, was, who is the master? And therefore, as we see in the following letters, he urges his disciples to employ this mode of Zazen. We'll finish with the introduction and go on to letter number 2 to the abbess of Shinryuji. In order to become a Buddha, you must discover who it is that wants to be a Buddha. To know this subject, you must right here and now probe deeply into yourself, inquiring, what is it that thinks in terms of good and bad, that sees and hears? Which is the same as the question of who. And this is the essence of the question who. Meaning, I don't know. I've got all kinds of intellectual answers. But they're always only partial. Intellect can never cover the whole of truth because it itself is partial. If you question yourself profoundly in this wise, you will surely enlighten yourself. If you enlighten yourself, you're instantly a Buddha. The mind which the Buddhas realized in their enlightenment is the mind of all sentient beings. The substance of this mind is pure, harmonizing with its surroundings. In a woman's body it has no female form, and in a man's body it has no appearance of male. It does not mean even in the body of the lowly. It is not mean even in the body of the lowly, nor is it imposing in the body of the noble. Like boundless space, it hasn't a particle of color. And yet here, always Basui's question, but who is it that sees color? The physical world can be destroyed, but formless, colorless space is indestructible. This mind, like space, is all-embracing, which means it is undivided, without opposition, without contradiction, without me or you, which doesn't mean that we all vanish. There's this and there's that. But this idea of me first, and then all the others. You may say, well, I don't have this idea. But you may have the idea I'm no good, everybody else is, but I'm not. It's the same thing. That is living in images, in a little, tight little space, tight little island. It does not come into existence with the creation of our body, nor does it perish with its disintegration. Though invisible, it suffuses our body in every single act of seeing, hearing, smelling, speaking, or moving the hands and legs is simply an activity of this mind. This reminds one of this exclamation of the layman Pong when he came to realization, just shouting, "Wondrous! How wondrous! Carrying wood and drawing water." And even if you think of it and still have a little bit of wonderment left in you, which schools and education and textbooks haven't all knocked out of you because they explain everything. How wondrous to sit, to walk, to talk. To feel the breeze, to hear the crunching snow. But the moment we may get an inkling of this wonderment, somebody is surely going to offer an explanation. We must be beware not to flood our kids with explanations all the time, because it knocks this wonderment right out of them. There are wonderful programs on TV these days of scientific exploration, but if they would only cut out all this constant explanation, which only diverts from seeing these beautiful underwater scenes, or the stars, the rocks, the animals. You can't see it if you have to listen to an explanation. And you just listen to a construct in your mind. And the real thing eludes you. Moving the hands and legs is simply the activity of this mind with a capital M. Whoever searches for Buddha and truth outside this mind is deluded. Whoever directly perceives that his intrinsic nature is precisely that of a Buddha is himself a Buddha. Although at a moment like that, the word Buddha isn't even there. There's never been a Buddha who has not realized his mind, and every last being within the 6 realms of existence is perfectly endowed with it. The words of a sutra, quote, "In Buddha there is no discrimination," unquote, confirms this. Now we must confirm it for ourselves. The first step being to become aware of this constant discrimination between what one likes and doesn't like. One finds oneself in a painful, agonizing, negative state of mind, and one doesn't like it. But it's there. It's there. Moo, hoo, or the breathing. Not to label it, not to hassle with it. To move with it and through it and beyond it. But not to think, well, I'll stay with it for a while hoping that. No. Hope is a waste of energy. Takes you outside of yourself, again into a construct of the mind. Totally to be that. Embracing, even though there's no one to embrace. We are that, from moment to moment, changing. Can this practice have a deep rock steadfastness about it? Even though there are all kinds of storms and weathers on the surface, all kind of erosion and accumulation. And yet, isn't it possible to practice with a steep rock steadfastness? Moo, ahoo, or the breathing, the counting. Everyone who has realized this mind and attained to Buddhahood wants to make it known to mankind. Shout it out. Whether people want to listen or not, to shout it out. Not to make propaganda. That's a different thing. You try to then convince and persuade and intimidate or lure. There's a verse in the Koran which says, before a fool, don't expound your dreams. Talk to people who want to listen, who want to find out. And only talk what you see directly for yourself, clearly. But men clinging stupidly to superficial forms find it hard to believe in this purposeless Dharmakaya, this pure true Buddha. Yeah, somebody who is really not into it yet, not really on fire with dissatisfaction and with questioning, with searching. You say, well, what's the purpose of this whole thing? Well, maybe many of you are questioning as to what am I doing this for? What the hell am I here for? These moods and mind states come at times. Can one sit and question and work without a single purpose? Because purpose is waste of energy. If you can do it and have no purpose, you'll find there's a real beam of energy. May not sound logical, but our logic, this particular kind of logic, comes out of our conditioning. Thinking that unless you have a purpose, or like in this country or in America, we used to have long discussions with people who said, unless there's a profit in something, people won't do things. The profit motive is the incentive for humankind. Nobody will build or manufacture anything unless there's a profit in it. In this case, meaning a financial profit. Maybe a completely new energy is tapped when one doesn't work for profit. When there's this wondrous activity, carrying wood, drawing water. Can one question or practice without the quiver of a motive, the quiver of an end in sight. All of oneself in that. And there's nothing outside. That's what it means. What is there outside you? Is there still a goal outside you? Or is it just the doing? Moo or who? Not knowing. Because he'll say, needing to find out if the vision can come to an end. It's a question. It's an inquiry. You don't know if it can or if it can't. You're going to find out. Because you're not going to take anybody else's word for it. Because somebody else may be deluded. Just giving you a tall story. To give it a name, Buddhas resort to such metaphors as treasure gem of free will, great path, Amitabha Buddha, Buddha of supreme knowledge, Jizo, Knon, Fugen, one's face before one's parents were born. Every epithet of a Buddha or Bodhisattva is simply a different designation for the one mind. And the designation of one mind is not one mind. One mind is without designation. If one believes in his own Buddha mind, it is the same as believing in all Buddhas. Thus in the sutra we read, the three worlds are just one mind. Outside this mind nothing exists. Mind, Buddha and sentient beings are one. They are not to be differentiated. Since the sutras deal only with this mind, to realize it is to accomplish at one stroke the reading and understanding of all the sutras. You may say as you open a sutra, well, I don't understand that very well. Well, for one thing, we're reading translations, and not only that. We're reading translations of translations of translations of something that was recorded several hundred years after the Buddha spoke. Fortunately, they didn't have cassette recorders at this time, really unfortunately. Or videotapes. Just in his last Zenbo article, Roshi talks about this, how there have been inevitable corruptions because things were collected, written down by usually monks which belong to an order, and the monk belonging to an order also has the interest of the order in his mind, unless he's totally egoless, and there are not very many individuals in each century wanting to maintain it a little bit, wanting to keep the women out a little bit. Things like that existed at all times, and they were written down. Whether the Buddha said this or not, we really don't know. Because it is said people used to have fantastic memories, passing things on by memory, but anybody who knows his or her own memory knows also how it can become corrupted. In terms of what one wants to remember, what one doesn't want to remember. One sutra says, the teaching of the sutras are like a finger pointing to the moon.
These teachings are the sermons that have been preached by all the Buddhas. Pointing to the moon is pointing to the one mind of sentient beings. Just as it is said that the moon shines upon both sides of the earth, in the same way that one mind illumines the inner and outer world. When it is said then that great merit can be derived from reciting the sutras, this means what has just been said and nothing more. Again, it is said that through services for the Buddha, one can attain Buddhahood, but to attain Buddhahood simply means to realize this mind. Thus, the merit of realizing this one mind in the single-minded instant is infinitely greater than that of reciting the sutras for 10,000 days. Just as perceiving one's own mind in a moment of single-mindedness is incomparably greater than hearing for 10,000 years why this is so. But just as one must progress from shallow to deep by degrees, so it is a blessing for beginners, either deluded or obtuse, to recite sutras enthusiastically or to invoke the names of Buddhas. It hasn't always been so either. There have been beginners who have had a glimpse without having all kinds of steps and stages to go through. Because the sixth patriarch is a shining example of that. For them it is like getting onto a raft or boat as a first step. But if they do not yearn to reach the shore of realization, contenting themselves to remain forever on the raft, then they only deceive themselves. A raft of chanting and ceremonies and rituals and reciting. Shakyamuni Buddha underwent many austerities, yet failed to attain Buddhahood. After this, he did Zazen for 6 years, giving up everything else, and at last realized this one mind. Following his perfect enlightenment, he spoke about the mind he had realized for the sake of all mankind. Did so for 50 years, I believe. These talks are called sutras, and they are the words flowing from the realized mind of the Buddha. This mind is latent in everyone. It is the master of the 6 senses. The effects and causes of all transgressions vanish in a flash, like ice put into boiling water when one awakens to this mind. Like we recite in Hakuin Zenji's chant, just one instant of samadhi extinguish evils. This instant means that the mind is not hooked up with all the past memories, all past habits and conditionings. Is that possible? Maybe someday medical science will find the physiological counterpart of that. No reason why there shouldn't be. A freely functioning mind, not hooked up to the network of past conditionings and associations, and yet not unhooked when it's necessary, when one crosses the street, not to run right into a bus. To think when thinking is vital, and not to think when it is absolutely useless, divisive, dragging in all past thoughts, emotions, associations. And yet at any point, so they are dragged in, can this be seen in an instant?
obviously it must be possible at any one instant, or else it would never be possible. Only after gaining such direct insight can you affirm that your own mind is itself Buddha. Insight into the truth of whatever is before one, inside one. It's this insight that liberates. The mind essence is intrinsically bright and unblemished. In it there's no distinction of Buddha and sentient beings. But its clarity is hidden by delusive thoughts, just as the light of the sun or the moon is obscured by the clouds. Yet such thoughts can be dispelled by the power of Zazen. Not using Zazen to fight thoughts, but to practice in the midst of the clouds, with this rock-like stability. Not bothering about the clouds, not giving them more energy by fighting them. That's only adding more clouds. Because the fighter himself is a great big cloud. In the same way as clouds can be dissipated by a blast of wind. Once they vanish, Buddha nature reveals itself, just as the moon makes its appearance when the clouds disappear. This light has ever been present. It is not newly obtained outside oneself. What is this inner light? The light that the Buddha spoke about when he said, be a lamp to yourself. Rely on no other outside lamps. Take the truth for your lamp. We will stop here for today. We will now recite the 4 vows.
All beings without number,
I vow to liberate endless blind passions. I vow to uproot Dharma gates beyond measure.